Hello, how can I help you?
Yeah, ambulance, this isn't an emergency, but my mom's got to go to the hospital.
James Kirkland, the suspect in this case, his initial call to 911 was very, very matter of fact.
Yeah, I've been caring for her at home, and she's got either a bed sore or a hemorrhoid situation. She's in a lot of pain.
And when emergency personnel arrived, they saw something much more devastating.
The police were contacted in the Kirkland case based on a call from the hospital and a subsequent contact from Adult Protective Services.
When Ms. Kirkland was brought to the hospital, her compression stockings from earlier wound care had fused to her legs and they had to be surgically removed. And then she had a pressure ulcer on her back, which when measured was about 11 by 13 inches. You could actually see her spine. We had been advised by medical staff that her wound when she arrived had been packed with newspaper and some kind of powdery substance.
The son was trying to do treatment on his own, not in consultation with the medical community, which really created a septic situation for her.
I did not feel at that time Ms. Kirkland was going to survive.
Once we figured out what exactly happened at the hospital, we triggered patrol to assist us at the home to secure it for the subsequent search warrant.
And her son answered the door. I identified myself as Montgomery County Police, and he immediately tried to step back in and shut the door. And I had to grab him and remove him from the house because, again, I didn't want him to alter anything inside the house.
Patrol officers transported Mr. Kirkland for us back to the station. During that ride, Mr. Kirkland made several statements to that patrol officer. Those statements, spontaneous utterances. He just blurted them out of his mouth. And that officer was awesome. Took down that information and gave it to us when we got to the station in order to use that for the subsequent prosecution.
And then I went in to interview Mr. Kirkland about the events.
She hasn't been to a doctor in a long time, neither have I.
And you know what? There are people who don't believe in doctors.
It's really difficult to not let your emotions get involved, but I think long term that it's important for me to get that information. And not to be judgmental, or at least appear judgmental at that time.
I did the best job that I could do.
Okay.
He told me that medical care is very, very expensive, and he did not want to spend the money on taking care of his mother.
After interviewing Mr. Kirkland, we did secure a search warrant, and myself and the rest of the elder vulnerable adult abuse team responded to that home with our forensics group.
We had to climb over piles of newspaper and trash and just personal belongings. There was nowhere for her to sleep, nowhere for her to go.
She did not have a bed.
And we saw this white chair that she was sitting in.
But it had pattern stains in it that appeared to be bodily fluids. There were pattern marks on our victim's back above her open wound that actually matched that chair.
We did find a box of cornstarch,
which we later determined is what he was packing the wound in her lower back with, and then cover it with newspaper to try to soak up the weeping that was coming from the wound.
Because her situation had deteriorated to such a point, we were able to move her towards a hospice at this latter stage of her life.
She survived for another month before ultimately passing, which the medical examiner deemed due to her injuries and the care that she did not receive from her son.
She had about $1 million in assets at the time of her death. She had insurance. There were many other choices that were available to prevent her painful death. He was ultimately convicted of 2 counts of neglect of a vulnerable adult, each of which carry a possible maximum penalty of 10 years in jail.
So about a year later, after we had the Kirkland matter, we had a new case involving a woman named Smith, where patrol officers were the initial responding officers on this scene.
It had been called in by neighbors that Mrs. Smith was out on the street almost to the curb. She was in an adult disposable garment that was soiled. She was in what I classify as like a sports bra. They tried to first ask Mrs. Smith where she lived, who could they call to help her. Mrs. Smith wasn't able to give them that information. And so they did call for an ambulance to come and assist them to check her out and make sure, physically, if she needed anything.
What? Did you go through the house at all? I didn't go through it, no.
Never went up through it.
So are.
The patrol officers did what patrol officers do. They walked up to the home and they knocked on the door. At that time, the front door was open and it was a screen door.
Hello? Hello?
They could smell urine and feces and stale odor in the house. Eventually, a woman appeared.
Hi. I guess your mother was outside. She was not completely clothed, but she seemed a little disoriented. So we were wondering if you maybe come out and give us a hand.
She turned out to be Mrs. Smith's daughter.
We'd been screaming for somebody in the house. We were concerned that you or somebody else might be hurt in the house also, because your mother really couldn't tell us that much. She was very disoriented.
She said she had been in her bedroom, and she mentioned that she had an air conditioner running because of the smell inside the home.
Are you her caretaker?
Yes.
You are? Okay.
They check their egos at the door, and they check their emotions at the door.
I know it's tough. I've had my parents were stuck at home for years before they passed away.
They were just open and listened, and they took all these awesome notes, and they secured this place and really helped recreate this scene.
Here you go. You're good to go. So she went to Suburban, okay? We're all set. Thank you for your help.
Thank you.
Okay?
When I responded to the hospital, I noted that her toenails were not cut and groomed, and that's something that I regularly look for. They had dirt underneath of them, her fingernails also. Additionally, she also didn't have great cognitive function. We had conversation, but she wasn't able to answer my questions directly.
Similar to the Kirkland case, law enforcement involved us almost right away to talk about evidence collection and what would be needed to ultimately hold Mrs. Smith's daughter culpable for what she had done in terms of the neglect of her mother. Her mother ended up receiving care in the hospital and treatment and ultimately went to a nursing facility. And part of the probation conditions for the daughter was that she wasn't allowed to care for vulnerable adults or seniors ever, to protect her mom and to protect the community. We know that someone caring for an elderly parent or family member is not easy. That having been said, the choices in these two cases that these children made about the care of their parents or lack thereof resulted in horrible outcomes.
The Smith case is the very beginnings of what the Kirkland case became.
Had it not been for those patrol officers, their abuse would have continued with this woman. I'm absolutely convinced of that.
So I would encourage officers to write that initial report, and when they do, write in there everything that they see and they smell and they hear, because that could make the difference later on in the final prosecution.